Now, my name is Maria Khan. I'm with the Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education. Just to make sure that you're on the right session, this is the session around skills development and the education of marginalized women, looking at financing and policy options in this regard. You're in the right room. We'll lock the door anyway, so in case you say you're not, we'll keep you there. Just so we know if you just strayed. So you're all in the right room, colleagues?
Yes.
Okay, great, excellent. Now we had a wonderful set of conversations this morning, and we hope that is something we will continue through the afternoon. And I think the way it's also been designed, the conference has been designed, we hope to unpack different facets of an ongoing conversation with respect to women's empowerment in work, with respect to gender and work, no? And one aspect which seems to have been a recurring theme, perhaps very openly and sometimes not so openly, is the value of education. Now, we spoke of ecosystems, an ecosystem approach. We spoke and heard constantly about the need to change attitudes. We thought skills, no, as a ongoing, was part of the mantra, if you like, of the conversations, and all of these relate very strongly to education. So this session is about drawing more concrete links between education, skills, work, and women's empowerment, economic empowerment, and overall empowerment. Now, perhaps to start with a bit of a background about why we as ASPE have organized this conversation, and a little bit about who we are, although I see that there are many in this room who are already familiar with ASPE because they are esteemed members of our organization. Well, first to perhaps introduce who we are to those who don't know us very much. We are a regional Asia-Pacific organization. We are one of the oldest networks in the region. We've been in existence since 1964, so we're past 50. And we bring together activists, advocates, campaigners, and practitioners of youth and adult education, all bound together by a commitment to advance the right to education and lifelong learning. We have always believed and promoted that education is a right, and we believe that as a right, it is universal and it is indivisible. In that sense, it is not in the purview, it's not only a right which should be enjoyed by children, it is a right which should be enjoyed truly by all. Now, this hasn't been, while there's been lip service paid to this concept for a long time, many of our governments have not actually promoted that in practice. Many governments do not even subscribe to free, quality, basic education, let alone education for work, education for empowerment, and education basically for adults, education outside of the formal system. So this has been a struggle for us for many years. Now, as a regional organization, one of the major spaces within which we operate are spaces where we try to influence governments in terms of their commitments globally. We find that these are powerful spaces by which we could shift the discourse, and also these are important spaces because our governments feel compelled to have to at least talk the talk and hopefully walk the talk. Now they feel obliged to meet up to standards which are agreed internationally. One of the most powerful spaces of late has been the space provided by the sustained agreement around, I think, hopefully many around this room would be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, which is right now the most encompassing set of commitments in development agreed by a large number of countries which define an agreement around development. Education is one of the key components agreed then. and through the struggles of civil society, while before it was only limited to a conception of universal primary education, the framing as far as the commitments to education have gone beyond just that. While asserting a belief in the right to education, lifelong learning has now become part of the commitment and the discussions. So we are elated and happy about that, but we have also been concerned about understanding how governments will eventually implement that. What we've been observing in the first 2 years and even running up to the SDGs was there was a growing interest in lifelong learning, but very much around the field of vocational and educational training, very much around the field of skills, very much linked to skills linked to work. So while there is lip service to a broader understanding of lifelong learning, a broader understanding of education and skills, which encompass more than just work-based skills, government's attention in a bigger way has been more and more around skills related to work. Not bad, but we thought we should understand what this means even more. Hence, this conversation we started within ASPE with our partners, including Azad Foundation, the hosts and the organizers of this wonderful conference, about trying to unpack what is the situation now in terms of financing, what is the policy environment as far as skills for work is concerned, as far as education for work is concerned, and going by the commitments of governments in the SDGs, that no one should be left behind, are indeed the most marginalized in work reached by skills for work and education for work programs. And in that sense, are women indeed being reached by these? We also wanted to understand what do we mean by what kind of work? I think we heard in the conversation this morning as well, and probably yesterday. We're not after just any work, no? Because a lot of work, especially for women, is exploitative. A lot of the work that is promoted is also promoting of a neoliberal approach which actually entrenches structural divisions and stratifications, not only between men and women, but among different groups who are socially bringing about other layers of disadvantage and stratification. So we wanted to understand what kind of work is actually also being promoted in the skills for work and a lot of this policy, growing policy and financing opportunities for skills for work, which is why we launched this study. Many in the room have been directly involved in shaping it and crafting what it should entail. And we decided to pilot this or to understand how this plays out in two countries. One is Indonesia and the other one is India. And a lot of the discussions which have been promoted in this conference actually resonate from the findings and the assertions which have come out exactly on that India study. So this forum has two objectives. We would like to introduce the main findings of the study, especially from the concrete case of Indonesia, because we would have heard much more about India in the course of the conference. And we thought we would invite also colleagues from the ASBE membership to respond to, reflect on what have been coming out of the findings of this study from the concrete realities of their respective contexts. So we have a colleague from Afghanistan who will speak to the situation in Afghanistan as it relates to this area of work. And we also have a colleague from Australia, from Women and Adult Education, Adult and Vocational Education in Australia, WAVE, who will speak to this, but from a more macro perspective. And we will conclude, we hope, with discussions with you around how this resonates in your different contexts, and likewise, what could be what could be ways forward, especially in the area of policy and advocacy work. And my colleague from ASPE will lead a conversation on this to also have that discussion with you. So that's how we thought we'd organize the conversation. Now, we are starting late, and I think colleagues would have made plans for the evening, so I think I beg your indulgence, and we stretch it only for about 15 minutes. I think we will be allowed to use the room, so the hope is that we carry the session until 5:15. Is that fine? Clear objectives? We can proceed? Okay, so our first speaker has many hats. The two closest to me and my heart I will dwell on. The first is she happens to be the president of our organization, ASPE, and she also is the head and founder of a wonderful women's organization in Indonesia called PECA, or Women-Headed Household for Empowerment Program in English. And she is here to share with us the outcomes of the research in Indonesia. So Nani, you have the floor.
Thank you, Marian. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this session. I think education is very important when we talk about women's work and want to change the gender, gender norm and the things. So, as Maria said, I will share you the research that PECA and ASBA has been doing in Indonesia last year on financing option for skills for work of marginalized women. There will be several purposes. I will give a little bit background why ASBA is want to do this, and then what kind of question we would like to answer, and also what our objectives, what we would like to see from this, and then the methodology, and then a brief on the result of this, and of course the recommendation. Why ASBA is doing this? As Maria already mentioned, that ASBA is very much committed on Education 2030 and also very actively involved in SDGs process, especially in Agenda 1, 4, 5, and 8. And ASBA is also, most of ASBA's members really work with poor and marginalized women. And we have very long-standing experiences and knowledge base on gender, education, skills, and work, with our members really working directly in live reality on this issue. So we would like to use all these resources, capacities, and really to answer several questions that Maria has outlined. So the question is what actually, if we want to really eradicate poverty in 2030 through education, what are the policy and governance and financing options required to include and provide skills development on adult education for decent work, economic and social well-being to marginalized women in our region, especially given this all perspective, no one's left behind, and social justice. So this is actually our question, and we also would like to understand more with all the available resources in particular country, who actually have more access to the initiative, who left behind, and what are the women in this initiative, what kind of skill acquired, all these kind of questions. So with the research, next please, we would like to also find out when we talk about the marginalized women, who actually marginalized women, because different contexts, government have different definition or indicators for marginalized women, and we would like to look at this from a particular country. And what are the existing policies, provision and financing options for skills building available, and what are gender notions of skills development adult education provided in particular country, and the financing gender just framework for skill development, what kind of framework on that. So the methodology, next, we do secondary data combination of secondary data and primary data collection. We review all the government policies, we interview the government officers, and also we have focus group discussion with marginalized women, especially women-headed family, poor women-headed family in Indonesia that we are organizing with, because they are considered the most marginalized women, the poorest of the poor in Indonesia. And here, that's some statistic of the resource person. Next, and here's the context of Indonesia. If you look at Indonesia, we are the biggest country in Southeast Asia in the region, even again the second biggest third biggest in Asia Pacific after China and India, of course. But if you look at the gender indicator inequality index, we are very much a little bit behind. We are in the rank of 110. Even we are lower than Vietnam, Malaysia, which are considered more or less developed. I mean, consider as smaller country than us. And look at specifically on economic factors on that, you can see that actually 60% of small micro enterprise owners across Indonesia belong to women. So women very much engaged, involved in economic and contributed a lot in our GDP. But this is where we would like to see what are the contradiction of government policy with the lived reality of the women. Women are not, of course many women also involved in formal sectors, like in the garment industry, just like our Cambodia's friends mentioned that there are many women in this, 90% women involved in garment and footwear industries in Indonesia as well, but mostly majority actually in informal sectors. Okay, next. Okay, so this is the results from the there is no specifically stated clearly in all the government documents mentioned about the mahua, the marginalized women. They mention about the poor women with, of course, the poverty indicator, which if we need to unpack it, because poverty indicators only look at the economic factors, not look at the gender notion of it. So we look at this from the result. There are three actually big cluster of marginalized women. First, women who are economically vulnerable. These are all the women who's below poverty line, have limited economic skills and limited economic resources. This all the 60% women in micro small enterprises under this category, very vulnerable, shaking our macroeconomic a little bit. For example, the crisis even now is already affected them very badly, and they're falling into very poor the society. And the second, socially excluded, because our country very much influenced by social norm, cultural, religions, and this. So there are a lot of stigma, for example, for women-headed family that we are organizing, or women working on women sex workers, women's in what you call it, entertainment industry, and also exclusion and discrimination against many things, ethnicity, religions, and all classes, all this. And the third one, physical limitation, of course, because of many things, including disability. Women in disability, aging, that older women get discriminated in many ways, and also geography. So if eastern part of Indonesia usually left behind, that's why our East Timor brothers and sisters want to get independent. They are left behind because of the development process. Okay, so in terms of the focus of the government, there are two key areas of government economic development to address this. The first, they focus on the creation of decent jobs for expanding employment opportunities in industrial sectors. Yeah, because we are moving to industrial countries, so they're preparing poor people to enter these labor-intensive industries, and also employment and business opportunities for the underprivileged. So they have this specific program. They create a lot of training centers in different part of Indonesia to support this program. And the second, the areas is on sustainable livelihood development, which very much focuses on facilitating poorest of the poor to survive and then start moving up a little bit from their situation. So this actually usually under the National Poverty Alleviation Program. So with all different program providing capital, skills, and support. And next, so we look at the key aspect of gender mainstreaming on this government. There are three components which some we thought is not really sharp in this way, in this sense. First, improving the quality of life and strengthening the role of women in development. So this is their narrative, which basically to support women on different kind of their life, difficult life. And the second, increasing protection for women against all forms of violence, including trafficking. So we have quite huge program on violence against women and trafficking, because that's the main issues, especially in post-disaster area, in remote area, a lot of young girls being trafficked. And then the third, building institutional capacity for gender mainstreaming and protection of women from all forms of violence. So the ministries of women's empowerment should be supposed to have job and responsibility to influence other ministry where actually the delivering development program central. Next, please. So the budget, we try to look at the budget. It's very difficult and challenging. So we don't actually have exact figure of the complete national budget. How much actually, what are the percentage government spend for this particular area? But we try to look at different ministries which we engage with, and we understand they have several programs for skills development of women, marginalized women, what they said. If you look at that, and the biggest portion is coming from ministries of agriculture and also ministries of maritime and fishery area. So this is the biggest part of budget allocation that we saw. And then also, of course, the Ministry of Women Empowerment, but the Ministry of Women Empowerment is not so clear in terms of if you look at from the education and skill point of view. Then we look at the model, because this is we have the program and then the budget, and then we look at what actually they do, what kind of training. There are several different models that the government skills training for giving skill training, helping women in this economic and employment. First model, they just provide capital. So through microfinance and all this type of instrument. It doesn't matter how much. Then they also have program like giving the 1 million each family, something like that. And the second, capital and skill training. So they give capital and then skill training. It's for maybe for starting the business or to become factory laborers on food warehouses, etc. Then capital, technical assistance, and then give equipment. Sometimes the equipment does not function at all, because actually the women does not use the skill after that. Then capital, skill training, technical assistance, and group development. This is also very popular models in several parts of Indonesia that the government deliver. Skill training, technical assistance, equipment. So this combination of skill training, capital, technical assistance, equipment, and group development is very common model in all the ministries. And the second, now one of our resource institution is a corporate, especially the corporate who has program corporate responsibility. Yesterday, Sita, we discussed about this, because what is the corporate, why we have to work with corporate. Actually, corporate usually do not really support this kind of the gender, if we want to exercise the gender inequality. So, but the several corporates has this model as well. Of course, they always relate it with their businesses. For example, one model, they have business piloting, which really at the end they expect this pilot will then connect, become supplier of their company. Or the others, they also related, so the women can become the workers in their company. The NGOs, on the other hand, has many combination of model in terms of skill training. But what the common and among many NGOs that we interviews is they always have a kind of personal development and advocacy work. It's a combination of this, talking about gender, home economics, so it's very interesting. And also one of the NGOs already also look at providing daycare for the women so they can involve in the training and helping with the branding and micro insurance for social protection, all this kind of support. Then I just want to share a little bit what we in PECA developed a model for our economic empowerment. We look, because in PECA, women-headed families, the poorest of the poor in our country, and the challenge they face is not only related with skills and capital, but much more deep on them, on how they perceive themselves. That's why the awareness rising, critical understanding of why they have become very poor, because it's not their destiny, but because the whole system actually do not give them opportunity for that. So a lot of investment process on this level, and then with a lot of intervention, capacity building, cooperative, on the things, then we try to open access to livelihood, but actually not only access, but also how they can control all this over themselves, because in many cases women enter the work, but then the other family exploit them. So then how to protect the women not become exploited because of this. Okay, and based on this, then we look at what are the gender notion of this, the skills training and the program that the government, NGOs and corporate try to do. There are three bigger categories if you look at this. First, from the notions of beneficiaries. Of course, some programs very much female-specific target, so it's only targeted to women. And then there are also program. It's very general, it's neutral. It seems like neutral, but actually they have women's preference, and then the gender neutral, as mean whoever can have access, then get access. And in terms of type of skill, the training given is mostly on general livelihood, which it's very common in rural areas, in poor urban areas. And also, but there's also training, but very limited on male-dominated livelihood. For example, fishing community. They give how to fix the board and the mechanical, but they don't give it to women. And then female-dominated livelihood, the cooking, cleaning, sewing. It is very typical, almost 100% for women. And then also enforces the traditional gender roles, which almost 100% of cooking class given for women, and also cleaning. For example, they want to work in the hotel for tourism. For the cleaning services given to women. And also, the gender notion also can be seen when the delivery approach, how they do it. Whether it's gender neutral, as when they open, or affirmative action given to women. Many are really this. And lastly, I want just to share what we in ASBAE want to recommend for the advocacy work on these issues. There are many stakeholders need to be, if we talk this morning about ecosystem, maybe let's say if we want to build the ecosystem, there are many stakeholders need to be involved, but put the marginalized women in the central of this. So they are not as the object, but they are the main the main subject on this process. Each stakeholder must play their own role, including us as the NGOs and academic who can actually support tracking policies and program financing, support advocacy, policy financing, and then also connect the community with different stakeholders. The corporate, on the other hand, also, if we want to work with the corporate, if we want to link corporate with the marginalized women, we need to be also taken into consider how to organize the marginalized women so they are not exploited in this sense. So we can link the corporate with the marginalized women so the marginalized women can have access to businesses and employment, but also we need to work building the capacity of these women to choose to have choices, not like pushing them to enter the job market, but rather than also helping them to create their own company, just like what Azad doing, I think, with these taxi drivers. And the government on the other side is very much on the policy, how we how we advocate to the government and also monitor how government implement the policy that in favor for marginalized women, and also how they budget on it. Because we have Indonesia very diligently signed every international framework and agreement. So we have all complete. But we have very challenge and difficulties in implementation. So there is sometimes very contradiction between what has been signed and then the policy being developed. And we are very much dictated by corporate. I think many policies really in the favor of corporation, transnational corporation, all things very much influence on it. So it's really big work on this. That's, I think, to start the conversation. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you very much, Nani. A round of applause for Nani. I'm sure this would have provoked some questions, even just for clarification among colleagues in the room. But let's keep that. Let's hold those for a moment until we hear the experience from Afghanistan, and then we open the floor for questions and for discussion. So may we hear now the experience from Afghanistan, and we have as our speaker representative from the Afghan Women's Network. It's an apex network of organizations in Afghanistan working for women's rights. They also are part of a member organization of ASPE, which is called ANEC, or the Afghan National Education Coalition. And so we are very happy that we could hear from our colleague, Roshan Mashal from Afghanistan. Roshan, please.
Assalamu alaikum for all. Good afternoon. I'm Roshan Mashal from Afghanistan, as Maria said. I come from the country that, as I heard, women are facing too much problems in their countries, but in Afghanistan, unfortunately, the women are faced too much problems in their families, societies, and also environment of the society and everything. They are very privileged people in Afghanistan. I want to share with you a presentation, a general situation of women empowerment in Afghanistan. And my presentation is will follow up about brief introduction of Afghanistan, and also brief introduction of ANIC, Afghan National Education Coalition, and the introduction of AWN, the organization that I'm working for, and also legal legitimacy of women's work, and also the other things that are related to the woman empowerment. Afghanistan that you see in the screen, this is the map, and over the map is the flag. It's divided in 34 provinces, that each of it has different colors, and also it's located in South Asia. It's bordered with the countries with Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan in the north, and Pakistan, also Iran, and also our neighbor in a very little distance, China. The capital of Afghanistan is Kabul, and it is largest the city of the 35 province. The population of the Afghanistan is 35.53 million, and also the area is 652,000 square kilometers. And the religions are Islam, 99% are Muslim, and 1% is Hindu. And also our official language are Dari and Pashto. The organization that I'm working for, its name of Afghan Women's Network, or AWN. Afghan Women's Network is established in 1995. I have very great pleasure I am part of this conference, and I believe this kind of conference that mix together women with each other, it has very benefit, and it is very effective for our work, because we have the experience. In 1995, when the Beijing conference happened, like the Dr. Susan yesterday said, from Afghanistan were 5 or 6 women activists there. And when they went to this conference and participate to this conference, they take the idea that the other countries, the women as a network can do everything, can do have a unique voice, and can do advocacy for women's rights in their countries. Because of that, when they come back in Peshawar, they mix a very small office by the name of Afghan Women's Network, and they're working from this year up to now. AWN is a non-partisan and non-profit network which members are part of women's organization and bodies working for women. AWN mission is to empower its members through cooperation and advocacy activities, awareness, individual capacity building, and development and the effective for civil movement to create positive change in different social, cultural, political, and legal areas of life, and to facilitate their involvement in stripes and representative equality in all parts. AWN have now, from the beginning, there were 5 or 6 women. Now AWN has 135 NGO under its membership, and also more than 3,500 individual members in all over of Afghanistan. Also, we have 7 offices, zonal offices, and all over Afghanistan. Afghanistan has 34 provinces and divided to zonal to 8 zones. In 8 zones, we have an active office And also in all provinces, we have focal points, and also we have access to all over of Afghanistan with our members' existence. AWN has 3 prior strategy areas and working about that. It's women, peace and security, and also women's political participation and leadership, and also women's social and legal protection. Under these priorities, we are working that many of issues of women are taken under these 3 priorities. And our activity are capacity building, advocacy, and networking. It means that AWN is the largest advocacy platform for Afghan women in Afghanistan. So, as Ms. Maria said, the education is the basic and very important things that we reach to. All of things we can arrive to achieve our goals, our aims, and our position, our roles. Because of that, AWN is a volunteer board member of the ANIC, Afghan National Education Coalition. Because of that, we are working together to have more space for women for their education with joint working in Afghanistan. The Afghan National Education Coalition was established under initiative of the NFA and technical support of Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education in ASBE, and financial support of the Global Partnership for Education and Global Campaign for Education on May 2016. It's very new, but I think it has very success because the largest coalition and networks are as member the coalition, and they can do everything jointly and have a good advocacy for education. Currently, ANIC has more than 50 members from national and international institutions. The members of ANIC are AWN, ACSFO, the National Teachers Council, Agency Coordination Body for Afghan Relief Organization in AGWER, Afghan National Association for Adult Education NFA, Integrity Watch, Afghanistan, Iowa, Women's Capacity Building and Development Organization WCBO, and Tashabbus Educational Organization TIO, and us are the board member of the ANIC. They are all of these are as a network. They have own member. They have own offices in all over of Afghanistan, and they are working for education. Most of them specific working for education, and like AWN as a part of their activity are working in education. And the other names are there. You see, they are international NGOs in Afghanistan, and they are as a supportive technical support or a volunteer member of the board of ANIC. So it was a brief information about the ANIC and AWN, and also for Afghanistan. I know it's not enough, but because of the limitation of time, I think it's enough. For the women empowerment, we believe to have a legitimacy legal way to do good advocacy and have good work for women. We have some legal legitimacy of women's work. At the national level, we have constitution, Afghanistan constitution is push and very supportive of women and gender equality. Like we have, and I bring here 2 examples of the articles. That article says 22 of the Afghan Constitution said any discrimination and privilege between the citizen of Afghanistan is prohibited. Some of all, and other one, the Article 23 also mentioned that there is no discrimination. Citizens of Afghanistan, including men and women, have equal rights and obligation before the law. These two articles is very good and very big tools for our advocacy to have equal rights in Afghanistan and have equal use equal opportunity in Afghanistan with men. And similarly, in the past 16 years, this has been ongoing efforts to revise, introduce, and partially implement law, policies, and action plans in relation to gender equality and women empowerment in Afghanistan. Afghan President endorsed 10 years action plan for women in Afghanistan, aiming for Ministry of Women's Affairs to focus on gender equality based on a plan in 2008 by the name of NAPWA. And in 2070, it's, the time is finished, but the goal that they are mentioned in this plan remain, and because of that, it follows with National Action Plan for Women Economic Empowerment, NAPWI, National Action Plan Women Economic Empowerment for NAP. And also National Priorities Program by the name of NPPs is also a good legal way for women. And also EVOLA, we have the law by the name of Elimination of Violence Against Women. It is a very supportive law and for women. However, we have so many opposition for this law, even in the parliament, but we had too much advocate for this law to save this. In the last year, the president have comment that it should save as a special law for the women in Afghanistan. And it was a big achievement for women in Afghanistan. And also recently we have anti-harassment law to protect women and children, and it passed the last year from the parliament. And also AWCCI, Afghanistan Women Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It is newly, last month, the president said it is forever. This chamber for women is forever, and it was a good opportunity for the women who are doing business or starting the business. We had for men, but for the women it's very new. At the international level, we had the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, or CEDAW, that government all committed on that, and also 1325 resolution on women, peace and security, and also we have NAP for the 1325. The NAP 1325 was launched in 2015 by President, and when it is observed by the international community, it is the best national action plan for the 1325, and we are working on that, and we are the first stage of implementation of the NAP in Afghanistan. And also SDGO Sustainable Development Goals. However, in Afghanistan, the implementation of this is going very slowly, but it's started. In the Executive Directorate, we have 4 tasks for each goals, and they determine the indicators for each goals, and also have the committees for implementation. But up to now, we don't have any report from the implementation by the government up to now. Also, in this month, the fiscal years for Afghanistan is finished, and for the world, its fiscal year for the 1398 is starting from now, from this month, from the January. But our year is starting in March officially, but our for work and physical year for our reporting and work is now is starting, and the budget for this year recently approved by Wall Gap, and it's totally it's 399 billion Afghanis, making up 275 billion ordinary budget and 124 billion development budget. It's the development budget and also the ordinary budget. There is a good point is I think I forgotten the gender responsive budget for the national document, a legal document for Afghanistan for women that it's announced from the president in 2016, and it's a good and big support for women and implementation of the program that run by government. Because of that, when we come to budget and the development budget and also an ordinary budget, the women are including the benefit of this. The government priority for fiscal year 1398 national budget documents announced for security, infrastructures, education, governance, agriculture, and rural rehabilitation sector, respectively 41% for the security, 14% for infrastructure, 13% for education, 9% for governance, and 8% for agriculture and rural area. From the total amount of fiscal year 1398 national budget. Likewise, 49% of the national budget, which come from the domestic revenue, and the rest and from the foreign aids. The national, it was the legal documents that support the woman empowerment, and also we have some program that implemented by the government and or national. The first one of promote, maybe some of you hear about, to support the Afghan government, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, announced the largest women's empowerment program aimed to advocating advancing opportunities for Afghan women to become the leaders of tomorrow. The program has started in November 2014 and continued till date. The program aims to support women advocacy groups, encourage women's participation in business activities, increase the number of women in decision-making positions, and help young Afghan women acquire leadership skills. A total of budget is 216 million USD has been allocated under this ambition program called Promote, that will be spent in training 75,000 Afghan women between the age group of the 18 and 30 in the field of partnership and government and leadership. Also, the other program is NPPs, the National Priority Plans, is a list of government's priority program projects and activities in the areas of education, health, youth, and sport development, human statements, science and culture, and economic development. The National Economic and Development Authority issued this annually as a mandate in the National Internal Revenue Code. The other programs is Citizen Charter. It's a program for 10 years We are now in the implementation of the first phase from the 2016 up to 2020. And the responsible ministry for the implementation is MMRD, Ministry of Rural Rehabilitation and Development. The charter is a key part of the government's development vision. It's a pillar within the national development framework. The charter will reform service delivery in Afghanistan at the sub-district level, helping reduce cost and duplication, increase community aware ownership and coordination, and create a whole of government program that improves the efficiency of service delivery. And also, I said about the gender responsive budgeting was introduced as a reform of the budget in Afghanistan. The organization that working for women empowerment, besides the government, World Bank, UN agencies, international community, NGO and also private sector. And also civil society are working too much for the woman empowerment. However, we have 2,500 NGOs, local NGO and international NGO are working in Afghanistan, and most of them are working for woman empowerment. But here is some example from AWN and also its member. AWN has a big program for 3 years from the Mandi, from different, and it was very effectively for the woman capacity building and also women in leadership and advocacy, and also young woman leadership for the youths that graduated from the faculty, and there is no any mechanism to going to the job or internship, but it was an initiative of AWN that makes a plan for the young woman graduated from faculty, and they have this program. And also AWRC, CW, AWC, and ANAFE, all of them are working for women empowerment. And the good one of this one that was initiative, this Kabul orthopedic organization, that they are working for disabled women, and they make the part of bodies that women are losing, and they make and fix it by woman for woman, and it's a big opportunity for disabled women in Afghanistan. And also the other initiatives was that the AWSDC for the first time it's established a restaurant that work the survivor of the violence working there and getting income. And also the project for the woman empowerment, pottery projects, agriculture skill project, weaving work, swimming project, leader, embroidery, microfinance assistance, small business, jewelry, sports, cooking, beauty parlor, and all. But all of them, most of them, are implemented in the cities and the big urban area. And the works where women are not found in the Afghanistan is you didn't find any woman as a mechanic, as a taxi driver or bus driver in public transportation, a guide for tourism, a carpenter, electrician, and also the shopkeeper in the free shopping. But we don't have women in this because of all of them is non-traditional livelihood. And I mentioned the AWN initiative for this non-livelihoods work, that driving courses we had in 2011, 3 courses for women, but regarding to some social barriers, they didn't use it as a work, as a job, but from the 60 women, could just 2 of them could drive own car. And they are the high-level people. One was the parliament member, and one was a doctor. The other woman can't to use the skill. And also we made a valuable team of the daughters, and also awareness about the encourage about the women joining to security association, and also we made police councils and all over of in some provinces for women, and also internship program for young graduated girls. The most the challenges in Afghanistan, security and also the lack of implementation of law, corruption, political, social and cultural barriers, restriction on the financial resources of the small enterprises, lack of control on their own area, lack of adequate facilities like logistic transportation for rural women and access to resources, interference of local influencer, elder and religious influencer, lack of protection in general for women, and literacy, and the recommendation are the government must create transparent and responsive monitoring mechanism through implementation of the laws and policies, and also the awareness by the ministries and religious scholars should encourage women for the women empowerment, and also Ministry of Information and Culture should have awareness for the to change mind of people, and also the government should make or create the for workers available markets, and providing the economic and business educational opportunity for women in country and out of country, and also the international community should increase budget for awareness, capacity building and financial support on women and their small business, and in this regard you can use the capacity of CSOs. And also providing microfinance and loans to women without very strict conditions. It was the recommendation that you can reach to AWN by these addresses, and it's the map of the member of AWN. Some of activity of women are there. Thank you for your attention.
It's always a challenge to try and digest such a rich set of issues and complexities of experiences in such a very short time. So apologies, Roshan, for rushing you and trying to force you into explaining these very complex issues in the time that we have. So, colleagues, the floor is now open before the next set of speakers for your comments, questions, clarifications. We saw, it seems, that there are policies, there is financing. I think we as civil society should take quite some credit for that. No? There are commitments. I think it seems that the jury is still out in terms of whether what is promised actually gets implemented in its fullest, and whether, in particular, skills, mainstream skills and training programs, supposedly for marginalized women, are actually directed at their real, total economic and full empowerment or not. It's also clear that there's a lot of creative work from civil society which we can draw from which good policy could emerge. Colleagues, comments, questions, insights coming from these two very rich presentations. We have 10 minutes for questions before we go to the next panel. Questions? Yes? Archana, please. Can everyone hear?
Thank you. I was really engrossed in so much that you both shared. And precisely what Maria was saying, when I was looking at those charts, Nani, which you had shared, and when I looked at the CSO part, it was so complicated, that chart, and when you look at the state, it's like very simple, few things repeated over and over again. And even in Afghanistan, when we really look at the kind and the variety of work that CSOs have managed to do, despite state having very progressive policy, like all men are and women are equal in front of law, and still we see these kind of challenges. So I think my question is then that we know state has certain nature, and despite us as civil society trying to do a lot of creative work, either it becomes a lip service for government to just pick up few important or some crucial words and start playing with those words, or they remain only at the level of those words but actually do not see the light of implementation or never become the reality. So ultimately, but we know that for change to happen at scale, it is the state that has to take on the agenda that we are all trying to push. So where is the what is the way that we can bring these two worlds together and really make state listen to us and not just take those words and play around and do lip service? Because I think we also somewhere get in. We do not know where is how to get out of that trap also, because they are using the right language. So what else? So that's my question and the curiosity is.
Let's take different questions and then comments, and then we have reactions. Yes.
This is Ferdowsi from Bangladesh. I'm working at Dhaka Hassaniya Mission. My question is, at first I want to give comments because we are working a specialized group, marginalized group, traffic victim. So disclosing identity of traffic victim is a humiliation and further victimization sometimes. But if we not disclose their identity, then it becomes the service provider like government, private agencies or corporate, they will not be sensitive to their vulnerable situation. But it's sometimes a contradictory situation because we try to link with the private agencies, sign some MOU to give them access in the job. So we sometimes we feel that they are not so much sensitive in respect of gender or their protection of rights or their payment like these things. So actually the accessibility in real sense, it is not real sense in accessibility. Then how come we will maybe they could get access in numbers but not in quality, like in protection or payment or dignity like these things. So my question is to Nani, how can we motivate the corporate or private agencies to give this marginalized women access in real sense, like in quality, changing in their life, in protection like these things. Thank you.
Yes, I have another hand.
Yes, hi. My name is Anna Alaman. I am the founder of Open Eyes. It's a social enterprise in responsible tourism. And my question is maybe for both of you, but I have seen the PPT of Nani, one of the Diapo, about the advocacy framework. Yeah. So one of our biggest challenges is how to make this holistic partnership engagement. Yeah. So I'm asking you both, what is the biggest challenges for you when you are trying to grab up the entire ecosystem and work together? And because we're trying to do that in tourism, like to how women can become guides and be part in the mainstream. And the second question is how, if there is another case study, how we can, there are sometimes pilots that works very well in different countries where we can replicate. We are very open to do so also if they have more suggestions. Yeah.
Okay, yes.
In your both presentation, I think one of the challenges you talked about the religion as a challenge, and especially a religious leader. So, is there any strategy or plan if you have worked with or you are working with them? So, can you share that?
Okay, I think it's a good point now to ask our colleagues to respond. Nan, would you like to?
Then how we bring this ecosystem. So we start with very practical things. We just end of last year we conducted multi-stakeholder forum in Indonesia, bringing different government offices hosted by ministries of education. We share this and also bring other ASBAIS colleagues from other countries, the Philippines and Vietnam and Mongolia. This is just to start the conversation, and then from this forum actually we also find out more other comprehensive approach that Ministry of Education has in terms of education skills training for women. And then also but we also aware that how it's gender neutral and a little bit gender blind on that sense. If we look at it, I think now we would like to proceed more. We approach the Ministry of Education really using education as the frame and the framework and the strategy for working on these issues. So because we look in Indonesian context, maybe not, I don't know, in other contexts, but for Indonesian context, seems like Ministry of Education is the most strategic government offices if we want to create this ecosystem, because they can actually also link us with other ministry and using education framework. Using SDGs for framework, and they can, the Ministries of Education in Indonesia, we have two Ministries of Education, one focused on higher level education and one on the basic education including non-formal. So we are very much engaged now with this Ministry of Education, and also maybe Thea can talk more about this, how our strategy later on. I think I want you guys talking more practical, bring live reality into their pictures, because when they make policy, they have all this big framework and understanding on it, but they have very little exposure on the live reality, where actually the women are, what are the challenges of the women in accessing all this their program. On this, the issues of, we have the issues of how to facilitate the women who has been victimized and stigmatized to get access, better quality access. We in PACA, we initiated one model, we call it Click PACA. This is a mobile, legal and information clinic, where actually we bring the services into the village. So we are not, the women do not going to the public services which is provided by the government, but we bring the government who deliver services to the village level. So we have Click Mobile from different village to different village. So with this, the government have very different attitude towards giving the services. They are more engaged, they are more sensitive, because it's very, at the community level. But of course, it takes a lot of process to make them willing to go. And we have several different clinics. We have legal clinic, we have social protection clinic. So the women who's, for example, we have women who are sex workers. When they come there, they come as a community member, and because the service is in the community, so they have to treat all these women and other community equally. So that's one of the strategy we implement in this based on our experiences. Of course, to fight this stigma, there are a lot of conversation even among the community and education and awareness rising. I think stigma is really the biggest challenge that women in our context face. Because soon they said, oh, you are divorced women, always very bad, have very bad position, and then how they have to really, prove that they are, they are somebody's, then otherwise then they will be excluded on that end. And Anna, I think Asbay, we have we already have this workshop. We call it conclave workshop, thinking conclave. I think Thea will explain this later as well for Asia, South Asia and Southeast Asia region. So we will replicate this research in order to have more pictures in our region. Because what is missing in the platform, regional platform advocacy, especially on policy and budget, on economy, is in economy. We have so many platforms, but I think CSOs working on economic, particularly in this issue, is almost absent. So that's why I think ASBE would like to over this, and we will contribute from all the research that will be done in this year as well, and then we will look at the big picture and then maybe develop platform for regional and then share it at the global level. That's what our planning. On the religious challenge, yes, in Indonesia we in the past 10 years we have very strong backlashes in terms of women's movement progress because of the right wing, especially the Muslim conservative groups movement. They are very well organized, very strong, and I think there are a lot of achievement that we have been made, the women's movement, but now really we have pushed back in maybe like 20 years back. But then 2 years ago we organized what we call is the first ever in Indonesia Women Ulama Congress. So this is for the first time we organized this just to first to announce that actually there is female ulama, because usually in Islam they only recognize men as the ulama, but we have thousands of women very knowledgeable in Islam and read the text and use the language and have very progressive way of thinking. So we organize women ulama as our alliances in movement, in women's rights movement. So they become our resources to use the same narrative, to use the same resources, but from the perspective of gender and justice. So we got very good positive feedback, and also of course I'm also challenge, resistant from the conservative group, but at least we make a lot of progress now. And we try to work on the family law issues. So we use family law as the entry point to exercise different power relation, including state and people. So this is our strategy, and we are so fortunate that we have so many scholars, women and male scholars, who are very progressive and very knowledgeable. Working on this, and I think Afghanistan is very interested on our approach. The president came to Indonesia and invited us, and we have also the president of Afghanistan. We introduced this framework, and they I think organized also their ulama in Afghanistan. I think last year. So this.
Thank you so much. Our strategy in Afghanistan, we are believing in consultation with the people, first of all, for our advocacy, for joining voices, to have one voice from the all over of Afghanistan women. Because of that, everything that we make decision about, as we make consultation meeting in all over the provinces by our offices, and we collect their voices as a position paper, Afghan women's position paper, and specific regards. And the other one, we have a good relationship and network coordination with the governments, because the governments are very supportive in the documents and the constitution and supportive for the women. Because of that, we have a good relationship and networking coordination with government to bring pressure from the different spots, like Ministry of Economic, that we have a meeting with them, that we have agreement with them that they bring some changes in the curriculum of the schools and the university, and they put some things, realistic guidance of the religion in the curriculum of the schools. And also we have good coordination with Ministry of Agriculture and Information to use media for the realistic guides from the religion. Because in Afghanistan, some people are misusing their religion, and they say about women's right that Quran didn't allow the woman to have education, to work out of the house, or travel alone. Like I'm here, I'm totally opposite for the Islam in their mind. But we have some flexibility in Islam. We need to have to use their language. Because of that, we planned and had some programs for the capacity building for women and religious issues, women rights and religion, to convince the religious scholars and their language and with very knowledge in the religious, because I think it's work a lot. And also we invited scholars in every event of us. And when we have an event for peace, we have an event for the women's right. We invite our scholars that he should analyzes this right from the Islam. Because of that, it is effective for the changing of minds for the people. And also with the Ministry of Hajj, we have coordination that they should in the Jum'ah Namaz, they purchase some words for the women's right and women's every rights in Afghanistan. It's our strategy, and we want the other strategy for advocacy for AWN is that evidence-based advocacy and also inclusive advocacy with the all women and all over of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Nani and Roshan, and your questions and your attention. Colleagues, we now move to the next round of presentations. From more micro-country level experiences, we now go regional. So leading us in the conversation would be Elaine Butler, who comes from Australia and a network of women adult educators and vocational training. And she will speak about the trends regionally with respect to women's skills and work. What are the discourses, what are the issues, which would then help us in thinking of ways forward. Elaine, please, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess you must be feeling like you need this for a week. I bring you greetings from WAVE. We're a network, a feminist network nationally of people who connect mainly electronically, and when we can afford it, we get together face to face. And our main area of work is in adult and vocational education with a focus on gender, particularly research and policy advocacy, but we also do have small events every state. So that's a little bit about WAVE. So what I've done here is to, in thinking about the amazing research that ASPE is doing and the kind of findings that are coming out of it, starting to look at the big picture that sits over the top and then work out where the women's schools development fits in and what some of the challenges might be regionally, given that we're talking about Asia Pacific. So that's where I'm heading. So I call this one Leave No One Behind with a question mark, because of course plenty of people are getting left behind. But I think this is the beginning of the work that ASPE is doing of a very important knowledge base. We'll come to that in a moment. So what I'm going to do in this, and I'll just take my watch off so I can keep a bit of my idea on time, is to why this research and why now, to locate it, and to look very quickly at what we're supposed to be in, which is anti-discrimination and gender. Then I want to shift to gender and education and use some work that's been done to inform the UN about what gender is, what it does, and what it aims for. And then under that, locates whole school development in a lifelong learning framework where it doesn't sit all that comfortably. Move to looking at women and skills development, and I'm going to take a gender perspective on that. And then some comments that I've got out of what I've read of the research so far, which are very preliminary, and a long list of what I'm calling hotspots that have come probably from me as much as the research. So just to get back to this guiding question, what we were asking was, what is the policy, government and financing options required to include and or provide skill development and adult ed for decent work, economic and social well-being to the marginalised women in the Asia Pacific women, given the perspectives of no one left behind and social justice. And the questions you've heard, particularly through Nani's presentation and also Maria's introduction. So the question then is, why this research agenda and why now? And what's the force field that's behind this opportunity where I think there are some real opportunities for change. But unless we understand what the force field is and what we're driving through, it's difficult. It's like one of those pinball machines where you get a little silver ball running around all the things and you've got to work out where it's going and who's playing it. So, and I won't I'm sure that this presentation will be available to you as a PDF or a PowerPoint, so I'm not going to labour the points. But we've got a whole lot of parallel megatrends going on at the moment. What's being called by World Economic Forum Globalisation 4, where there's a whole change in world order and geopolitics. We're going from unipolar to multipolar. There's increasing inequality globally. It's a very big issue, and I can't think of a country where it isn't an issue. And in fact, people like the OECD say that we're at a tipping point in relation to increasing inequality, and that it can no longer be treated as an afterthought. So these all give us levers. Impacts of climate change and the increasing acceptance of the need for sustainability, which is going to have flow-on effects on the economy. Increasing population movements, migration and urbanisation. I heard recently that by 2040, India will have another 5 megacities that don't exist at this moment in time. So, we're in extraordinary times. Rapid change of global and national economies, from multilateralism to what they're calling plurilateralism, and labour markets globally that impact like dropping a rock into the water. They hit the bottom heaviest. And a rapid increase also in interconnectedness. So there's a whole lot of pluses and minuses there for us. We're also in what's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, or 4IR. It's now got its own acronym. And I'm sure that you've all heard plenty of this. So with the Internet of Everything, big data, porous boundaries, increasing automation, rapid digital and technological transformation, So times of change always present instability and opportunities. So with these trends that are going on, people are now starting to talk about a global New Deal or a new global contract. There are already, we can feel challenges to neoliberalism, long overdue, and even talking about inclusive growth, rather than the trickle down that's been taken for granted. And there are people like Piketty et al. Who are working about this. The implementation of Agenda 2030, which I'll come to in a little while, the hugely transformative power of social media, like the Me Too movement, which I think we can really kind of get a handle on. There's an increasing recognition of benefits, social and economic, of gender equality and social inclusion. We heard a little bit about that this morning. And there's a heightened awareness of the need to address violence against women and indeed the whole issue of violence altogether. So these are kind of some of the quotes that are coming out at the moment, just saying, with all these mega trends happening at the same time, they amplify each other and they result in bigger exponential shifts. And this, of course, is presenting major challenges, not just for us, the people who are living it, but also for governments and for policy makers. It's also impacting directly on the way that we work and the way that we live, as Peyton says. And this is why the World Bank is now saying that we're in times that demand a new social contract and a global New Deal, as equality of opportunity will play a big role in the changing nature of work. So I like to hang on to these things that I think we can use. And of course, the future of work and the future of learning are interdependent. Lifelong learning is integral in this transformation, and skills for life and work are part of this new mix. Now, we talk about our region as though we all know what it is, and I came across this diagram which kind of like really shot it home for me. With the population of Asia Pacific, 55% of the world. So we've got the world on one side here, and then you can see the Asia Pacific region and how it's made up. The two large ones, of course, India and PRC, and then a number of other smaller countries. But as a region, we also, and given the shift in geopolitics, we're becoming increasingly important, and I think that this gives us room for disruptive policy work. Some of these things that are starting to come out, of course, when people talk about Asia Pacific, it's an incredibly complex and highly heterogeneous clustering of countries, and it's the difference in the diversity, I think, that makes it so interesting. Combined population 1.41 billion, 55%. And in the 2017, 5 of the 10 most populous economies in the world are located here, including the top 2. And that's PRC and India, and India is certainly on the move. However, in developing Asia, despite some reduction in poverty rates, there are I read this figure, sorry, I meant to fix this up. There are 330 million women, this is, across the region who are still living in extreme poverty. So that's an edit that's needed. The region's diversity is illustrated in part by divergent rankings in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report. And in the region, we've got countries that go from Philippines, which is up at number 8, to Pakistan, which is down near the other end of it. And Australia, I might say, is not doing terribly well in there either. Women in Asia are 70% less than men to be in the labour force, with country-to-country percentage varying anywhere from 3% to 80%. So when we start to talk about how we're going to advocate on, and particularly the work that ASPE does, on regional and global platforms, this is the challenge. This gap in female labour force persists despite economic growth, decreasing fertility and increasing education. Many of the women where this stuff are, of course, as we've heard. Surveys are also suggesting that relative to men, women are still perceived to have lower skills for the labour market, and of course that social norms that emphasise domestic work as a primary responsibility of women constitute a major constraint in their social activities. these messages, I'll let you read these later, are messages that are actually being given to governments in the region through ADB. So responsibilities are being pushed to government, to actually, national governments, to actually start to think differently about how they're organising their economies, how they're organising their governance, and ultimately how they're going to organise their funding. And part of that, you'll see the bottom dot point here, is to encourage, well, I think actually these are all really, really positive. They're looking at female economic empowerment, but also governments don't know how to do it, basically. We do, so they can learn from us. To attract more female labour force participation is a huge want everywhere, so suddenly we're desirable commodities. But they're saying that measures have to be taken to increase security, protection, better workplaces, safety, etc., etc. Governments are getting these messages not just from CSOs, but also from ADB, at regional forums, OECD, etc. And they're saying that to encourage more women to seek and demand better workplace opportunities, those policies that explicitly promote skills training for them need to be instituted. And they feel that this will also help that more women will be seen and heard in traditionally male-dominated fields. Now there's a lot of talk about female labour force participation, and so it's something that's kind of like sits up there and we all know what we're talking about again, but it's an incredibly situated and complex and multi-dimensional factor. And as this diagram shows, right at the top of the social norms, and we've got labour market policies, and then the things that's women in the middle, and here women's labour force participation. This will probably be easier to read when you get the printouts. So on the one side is the opportunity cost of work, housework, care, foregoing leisure, other household incomes, and social costs such as stigma, mobility, and norms that we've been hearing about. The other side, female wage gaps, between male discrimination and comparative advantage, and in the work environment, flexibility or lack of it, discrimination, harassment, opportunities for growth and location. So this is the web that's got to be negotiated for improving female labour force participation. Okay, sorry about this gallop through the world, but we'll so Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, about which I have huge hope, but also starting to get some niggling concerns. All the words are right, the framework is right, everybody's signed up for it, so let's move them on. They're impacting a lot of the planning and policy work that's underway in this region, so it's a really good opportunity to use them, and we're very, very lucky to have had ASPE involved so much at the negotiations, getting this framework up, and especially SDG 4. So the ones for this project, SDGs 1, 4, 5, 8 and 10, I think are the main ones for the research that ASPE is doing. Now this is some of the rhetoric, and if we're going to use the rhetoric back, it's about ending extreme poverty, reducing inequalities and addressing discriminating boundaries, if we're going to leave no one behind. And it's about choice and it's about opportunities. And the 5 key intersecting dynamic factors that actually impact on who gets left behind and what choice they have or don't have are these: discrimination, and that of course includes gender, geography, where you actually are located, socioeconomic status, governance, and shocks and fragility. And this region certainly has had its share of shocks. We keep on reading off them in the paper. This diagram is from UN Women, it's turning promises into action, looking at gender equality in the 2030 agenda. And it's actually mapped the common forms of discrimination faced by women and girls. So it picks up on some of the questions that have come up earlier, but we're not heterogeneous, that there's a whole spectrum on gender, and intersectionality is key when we're thinking about what we do. One size does not fit all. And this diagram just runs through, I won't read them through, but it goes from sexual orientation right through your Indigenous status, ability, age. It's a really good mapping. Caste, origin and nationality, marital status, HIV status, they all come together and intersect, and of course they form people's identities, which is so important. We've heard a lot about barriers in the last couple of days, and I've been hearing a lot about barriers for the last 40 years. They have been researched until we could die under the load of research about barriers, and they're now really, there's so much evidence about them, and they're well accepted. This diagram came out of a program that was done in through Indonesia, Women in Wash, Water and Sanitation. And it shows it very succinctly. Limited access to finance, socio-cultural barriers, regulatory barriers, corruption, barriers to education and training, limited access to business development services, and religion. Okay, and the networking can work two ways, of course, because if you're not in the right networks, you're not in the story. Gender equality, SDG 5. Look at this map. I'll let you have a look at this some other time. This is where SDG 5 goes right across the SDGs. There's a lot of work that's being put into this. One of my big disappointments with SDG 5 is its lack of attention on education. But there you go. So gender equality is key to delivering the 2030 agenda, and we can certainly reach that. However, and this is a new report that's just come out through ADB and UN Women, specifically about Asia Pacific. We're already limited by the indicators that are under the SDG framework, and only 26 of the 85 gender-related indicators are widely available here. So already we're on the back foot, but it gives us something to fight about. This report that I just referred to, this is that last diagram cut in half so I could fit it on a PowerPoint for you. Shows what the key findings were, and this was ADB and UN Women looking to actually progress the SDGs for women. So women and girls here 11 times more time on unpaid care work. We heard that figure this morning from UNDP, I think. 1 in 3 experiencing some kind of violence or harassment. The female labour force participation rate is actually falling. There's the highest child marriage rate in the world, huge gender gaps in financial inclusion, 330 million women and girls below poverty, and 50% of the female population still living in slums, most of them with no access to clean water. So they've come up with 4 transformative policy areas, and education and skills are going to cut right across those 4. We've also heard how some of the corporations and the official economy have been doing the sums, working out how much they could actually make or how much they're losing by not pursuing gender parity. And the figure for this region, $4.5 trillion in additional annual GDP in 2025 would be added to the economies of Asia Pacific by advancing women's equality. And this is when governments start to sit up and take notice, whether we like it or not. And this map actually shows where it's highest, where it's high, medium and low in the different countries in the region. Now I want to now come to gender and education. So I'm slightly shifting focus here, and this is some work that's been done by Elaine Unterholder. I really admire the work she's been plugging away. First of all, looking a lot at school education, but her perspective is widened. She works with a lot of colleagues, and she's gone through a whole lot of documents at UN and above level, looking about around the SDGs, how people actually talk about gender in education. So this is a really useful way. And she's come up with these 3 ways that gender is used. Critical lens to look at the power of intersecting inequalities. substantive equality, which is what we're after, within and beyond education institutions, considering structures and forms of agency, and we need to get to this to understand what's going on. And then accountability processes, so important, that support the building of transformative conditions for education quality and sustain education institutions. And then the concept of what they're aiming for. It can be a linked term. It comes into policies and practices within and beyond education that support the connection of rights, equalities and social justice, and also can provide, and it seeks to provide a critical review of accountability outcomes, whether policies and the rhetoric do what they say they want to do or not, and whether they advance or protect normative frameworks like rights, capabilities and social justice. So she's put this into this diagram, which I think is quite useful. And my feeling is we need to be doing all of these three things all at the same time. And we need to be working from grassroots right up to the global level in the middle. So I think this is useful to think about if we're on about substantive gender equality, linking skills through to decent work for women and girls. We're right in this. This is where we are. This diagram again is probably going to be one that you could spend a little bit of time looking at. It's the first one I've actually come across. It was from UNESCO in 2016 in the GEM report. And it actually shows all of the areas within a lifelong learning framework where skills development takes place, from the informal through to the non-formal through to the formal. I wish they tipped this upside down. Why the informal is always uncertain, who knows. And then it goes from early childhood through to doctoral, and it also looks at qualification frameworks and at early family-based childcare and early childcare. So skill development happens right across in this particular framework. I'd like to take a little bit of time now to talk about what it is and where it all fits into this mix. And I've got to say right from the beginning that skills development is just one of a whole multitude of skill-related concepts under a highly political meta-discourse of skill. And the concept of skill is political, it's highly political. It's also very gendered, and it's absolutely shot through with power relations. So it's not this nice thing that we just think about, that it's somebody learning how to do something. How it is defined, and so the approach that's taken to policy, governing, funding and implementing programs is dependent on the values, intent and vested interests of whichever of the numerous key stakeholders is, or if they're working in collaboration, are determining the understanding to be used. So the definition could be quite narrow and very technical, and that's the one that flies around the universe most often. Or it can focus more directly on learners' interests and well-being. So the language of skills matters. We cannot take it for granted, and we shouldn't use it flippantly or loosely. We have to get very clear about what we're talking about, and I think there's a little bit of work to be done there. Most often, official skill development is associated with the Global Local Institute of VET, and vocational education training, and especially that of TVET. Now I've got to say, remember TVET started from Blue Trades apprenticeships, and that's something that needs to be kept in mind. And however, while skill development can happen in a multitude of sites and places, how skill is recognised and valued or not is highly significant. So TVET's in the process of going through a transformational time, and particularly so in this region where the SDGs and the work of UNESCO, who's looking after this whole category, is really moving things along. So this is a diagram that's come out of one of the UNESCO publications. I can see I've left the source off here, sorry. And they're saying that there's three analytical lenses, but this is to transform TVET. This is quite interesting because they've got around here social equity, sustainability, and economic growth. So we're already sitting in an economic growth paradigm. And then the ones that you get in the middle here, the greening environment, productivity, and I can't even read this other one, sorry, I shrunk it. It looks as though they're all coming together, but these things are all held together in tension, and actually there's nothing smooth or nice about this. So there's a whole lot of power dynamics going on here, and how it sorts out is going to be very interesting to see. We know that the UNESCO framework has, which was agreed 2015 or 16 across X number of countries, has got the 3 supporting pillars with gender in the middle, sustainability and greening economies on one side and youth on the other, but most people haven't really taken a great deal of cognizance. So, TVET is an institutional bridge that directly links learning and education and training. It's got a wide definition, and this is the definition down here that we need to keep on talking to our systems about. So what do we have to do? We've got to change the discourse, really. I think this is just gorgeous. It would be nice also to see women and men at work eventually. If we look at this from a skills perspective, I'm going to have to start. Formal TVET and national, right, okay, thanks, 5 minutes, have got a long history of resisting anything to do with gender. Most national TVET systems are written in gender-neutral language, and they might have some specific clauses that say what they're going to do to women and girls, but they are most often not implemented or resourced or evaluated. Very few countries have developed or implemented national strategies for gender in TVET, which they're all supposed to have. We had one in Australia, we fought really hard for it, it's gone. So we're now back on the same old treadmill. The transformation and the opportunities are really slow and uneven, with very few of the systems incorporating GESI, which is gender equality and social inclusion. Really we're going to have to look at the power structures here. And we know that despite increasing levels of education globally for girls, more women and men are still going into low-paid jobs, so strategies and interventions informed on the knowledge of contextualised gender relationships have to be a focus for us. I'd like to go back now, I'm nearly at the end, thinking about what I've read about the projects, the research that was done to date. And this is stage 1, India and Indonesia. The research draws on timely opportunities and potential for change that's provided through these contemporary global agreements to inform and support relative action, regional, national and local contexts. We all have to work out which one we're going to work at. The research accepts the challenge of leaving no one behind. The rhetoric in a practical and collaborative outcomes-focused process while understanding the politics and the power dynamics at play. It maps the complexity and the issues and the opportunities relating to policy, finance and government for schools governance, for schools development for marginalised women in 2 very distinct and very different dynamic countries in our region. Drawing on their experiences, the studies contextualise and localise analyses of what works, what's needed and why in each of the 2 countries. The research confirms the existing research. Women want to learn and they want to work. It confirms what works for women we actually know. It confirms the shared common barriers and the needs and the demand. So in other words, skill matters. It extends and adds to existing knowledge, providing evidence including best practice case studies for dissemination and to act as a foundation for action and further investigation. And the research illustrates how policy trickles down from global to regional to national to local levels. That policy silos matter, as does governance. That funding is precarious of skills development programs for women. They sit way down in the hierarchy instead of being properly funded, properly regulated and having what is due. And And it provides a knowledge base and a platform for advocacy at all levels, and the findings raise many more questions. And here are some of my favourites. Data, evidence, what gets measured matters, and we're getting let down by the lack of data. Gender power relations, and through the SDGs, this is a little bit of a disappointment when I started to read some of the critiques of the SDGs, that it's really the inclusiveness. Is it inclusiveness or economy as usual? Huge vested interest, and I remember learning at the beginning of the SDGs that capitalism was going to be one of the fastest growing forms of capitalism, and it's dominated by huge corporations and vested interests who are spending trillions on infrastructure, so we need to get our hooks into that. The ever-increasing privatisation and marketisation of TVET is a really big worry. If we're after quality, affordable, relevant public provision, it has to be well-resourced, accessible and maintained. We're actually fighting to keep it in Australia. Skills development for what? For whom? Decided by whom? Who gets to decide who does what skills program? Women get put into programs that they might not want to be put into, that takes them into lousy work, doesn't take any account of what's going on in their lives. Now, the accreditation of skills and recognition of learning is something that I've been on about for a bit, but going back before that and remembering some work that we did in Australia a long time ago, we also have to almost start coaching women or working through processes where they can name and claim the skills they have, because women tend to talk about what they can do in terms of personal attributes, and language matters in this game. So to say I'm good with children, or I grow vegetables and sell them, that ends up if we're going to put that into skills language, that woman would have a skills passport like with RPL that would cover agriculture, business, marketing, communications, personal development, etc., etc., probably budgeting and finance, etc., etc. So we really have to start helping people talk about their skills and what they can do. And I think one thing here to do about this also is to think about getting skills passports so people can write down what training they do and they've got something to carry around with them. Okay, so I'll finish up now saying, this is my favourite little saying at the moment, nothing about us without us. So I think whether we're in policy or government or whatever, we need to be there at the table. And this is my next favourite slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Energy levels, colleagues. We can go to the next. Alive?
Very easy.
Easy? Anyone wants to lead the dance to get people up and...
I wonder about opening the curtains. It's so dark. I don't know whether they're permanently shut.
Maybe... Yeah, I don't know. So colleagues, we can go on? Yeah? All right, so Thea, member of the team of ASPE, she's our operations and programs coordinator. She basically is in charge, our head honcho as far as our policy advocacy work. Next steps, what are ideas about taking this research and this initiative forward? Thea, please.
Good afternoon. Before I say the next steps, I would like just a short reflection while listening to the presentations. I remember when we look at commercials or advertisements, for example, they always say there's a problem and this is the solution, right? So if you have a headache, you take paracetamol, problem solved, right? If you have stains in your clothes, you take Tide, problem solved. And while listening to them, I was listening at policy situation in Indonesia, in Afghanistan, and then Elaine is providing us with frameworks, recommendations. I was thinking, problem, solution. But it's not as easy as we would think it would be. So what ASPE is doing is to take small steps with our network And in a sense, this will answer Archana's question, what do we do? Because there are a lot of policies. And in fact, in many of the regional, even global and country discussions, our governments always present a very glowing report of this is what we have done, no need for civil society to tell us the solutions because actually we have been doing this. Okay. But of course, because we are very persistent, for example, in this research, we wanted to look at the programs and policies of governments. The first question is that, are they reaching the marginalized women? Okay, if they're reaching the marginalized women, what kind of programs are being offered? And then also, is this projectized, given by USAID maybe, and then finish after a year, and then that's it. So we also looked at the governance, and then we look at financing, and what are the schemes. Okay, so after doing these researches, what's next? We know that there are a lot of gaps in the researches. Also, one of the reflection of our teams, because as we works with the countries, one of our reflection is that there is no available data. Data in Indonesia and India are very uneven. And even in India, which boasts of skills India, the data are not available. Even if you like online or you go to the government, data is not available. So it's not complete, So we say that our research is continuing. So the first step, next please. Okay. The first step is we continue doing case studies. Why is this? Because we all know the answers, we all know the challenges in general, but we have to look at the local context. What are actually happening at the ground? And this we do continuously. Why? Because administrations change. Whatever data we present today, we present it to another administration. So we always have to have new evidences. Secondly, because information is very fast also. So if we had the research in 2015, that is already obsolete data. So we always strive to have new cases, even though we keep repeating ourselves. But new data based on the ground is very important. So we have a case study in India, from India and Indonesia. ASBE plans to do 2 more case studies from Southeast Asia and 1 from South Asia. And this is also an ongoing research. And then we are also going to do, we have done a regional scoping paper looking at literature at the Asia Pacific level. But then again, we also realized that there is very little data on financing of skills development, particularly for marginalized women. So if you look at these keywords, there are very little data. We would find skills development, but only skills, not skills and education, but there is also very little on financing. So this is something that we have realized. And therefore, where do we look for this data? We have to go at the country level, we have to go to ADB, we have to go to, so there's another set of challenge in getting information. And the second one is to develop knowledge products. Because we know that the World Bank, the ADB, they're very fast. They have very good researchers, they have money, but for civil society, we have very scarce resources, but we still would like to come out with knowledge products. And so ASBE is coming out with explainers, something that legislators and government representatives will find very easy to read, but also based on evidences at the country level. So that is an explainer and also spotlight report. We are going to do regional spotlight report on skills development for decent work for marginalized women. And we would like to present this in the upcoming high-level political forum in 2019, where SDG 4 and SDG 8 will be evaluated globally. Next, please. And of course, we have to be prepared. That's the next step, is capacity building. We realize that even among civil society, what we consider skills development can be different in different contexts. Our frameworks can be also different, and there's a variety of frameworks also in skills development. And in this conference alone, we have heard a lot about ecosystem. We have also heard about gender just markets. So for us in education sector, to be able to do meaningful advocacy around quality skills development for decent work, we have to understand also the whole narratives coming from the women's movement, from those working on economic empowerment, and so on and so forth, and those working in the labor sector. So in ASBE, we would like to develop our capacities on advocating skills development for decent work for marginalized women. And marginalized women, also we say that both the young and adult women. So both of them should be the focus of our advocacy. There are also a lot of materials on women coming out recently, very many materials, so we have to also maximize these resources. So ASBE will come out with a compendium or at least references that advocates can use to refer to when talking about skills development for marginalized women and capacity building. One of the things that we also would like to look at is not only, and this was referred to yesterday, we do not only look at the provision, but we also, in the education sector, like what Elaine said, a passport, skills passport, what is that? So how can you build competencies? What is accreditation? What is accreditation equivalency? More and more NGOs would like to have their seminars recognized. So how do you go about this? Even understanding this education system, lifelong learning system, curriculum development. Because many of us are into advocacy, we have to know the technical matters also. Like legislation, policies is not only the policy on women, but it's also the budget is a yearly policy, in fact. The budget is a legislation. Every year it is passed. So we have to understand the technical aspects of engaging in the budget also. So all of this will have to go into the capacity building within ASBE, but of course others are also very much welcome. Next, please. Yesterday also we talked about the government's political choices. We say that these policies are not something that fall out of the sky or inevitable. We say that the policies for women or the discrimination against women or the non-policies are actually political choices. So in ASBE, we mobilize our members to push government to protect and to guarantee the right to education. And in this case, we would like to focus on skills development for marginalized women. So we would like to have a synergy among the practitioners and the advocates. We know that the practitioners like Nirantar or Azad Foundation, they have very good practices. But how do we translate this into policies? Into policies that can actually be implemented by governments, that can be scaled up, you know. So this is the kind of synergy that we want to develop, and perhaps in this network that we have in the NTL, it could be a very good way of scaling up our work, also our advocacy. Many of the participants in this workshop or in this conference are practitioners actually, so us advocates are learning so much from the work being done by the practitioners in the field. We also said that part of our work will be to monitor government programs. In our experience in presenting this research to the government in Indonesia, for example, the Indonesian government said that, oh, we actually have a plan, a roadmap for women's empowerment. And so they presented this very good roadmap related to SDGs, SDG 5 and SDG 8, SDG 4. Policy advocacy, it means also not only working for new policies, but also monitoring policies. So yesterday in the panel, we talked about policies not being implemented, so it is also our role to monitor the programs, not only the policies, but the programs of the government, and also intergovernmental programs, because in Indonesia, the Southeast Asian Minister of Education Director himself said that we are going to build women's schools. You know, we will start in Indonesia. Okay, so we have to monitor this, you know, what's the impact? Will women from marginalized sector really benefit? So that's part of the work that will be done by members of ASBE. And of course, country level advocacy. with the Ministry of Education and other agencies involved in skills development. Next, please. So mobilization, and the next would be to transform regional and global discourses. So sometimes when we work at the regional level and you see, the many challenges that we face, and when we talk with the government, we talk with the World Bank, even when we talk with the UN, there are many barriers to our voices being heard. But then again, we cannot stop. So we say that we need to transform the discourses at the regional and global level, at the Asia-Pacific and global level. And they always say that civil society are very noisy, but that's our role. We always have to be noisy, but of course, evidence-based also, principled. And so ASBE is participating in the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, which will happen in March 2019. We are also part of the Asia-Pacific Regional NGO mechanism, which is the civil society mechanism for coming together of all sectors working on SDGs, not only on SDG 4. We are also involved in the Asia-Pacific meeting on Education 2030. The APNED focuses on SDG 4 monitoring, and this is done by UNESCO Bangkok. So as they members are involved in these regional and global platforms. So it is very important for countries. We are actually fueled by the evidences that we get from the countries. It's very difficult to speak on behalf of Asia Pacific if we don't have the evidences from, for example, from Indonesia, from Nepal. So what ASBE does is to collect all these evidences. We do cross-country researches and then present the insights at the regional level. So just, and of course, we can also look at the Commission on the Status of Women. It will have its 63rd session this coming March 2019. So next, please. So if we look at the what to watch out for, and ASBE will be involved in these platforms and to present, among others, not only this research, because ASBE is also doing spotlight reports on SDG 4. We are also doing youth regional research. We are in skills development for decent work for marginalized women. Is also one of the researches that we will bring into these forums. So these are all the regional platforms that we are involved in, and many of us are also ASBE members here. But these are also the global arena that we are involved in. So I mentioned already the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development in March. ASEAN, Southeast Asian nations, it has a very strong priority agenda on Tibet. In fact, its third agenda is on promoting Tibet, but Tibet is focused more on the higher skills, 21st century, and it looks at the ASEAN economic community. But the question again is, many of the marginalized women, many of them are migrant workers. So how about skills development for migrant workers, upskilling, and all of this, and protecting the rights of the migrant workers? In fact, this is one of the issues that were raised in Indonesia, that when we talk of skills development, it's not only the skills, but also protecting the rights of the women who go out of their country to work in the Middle East or in other parts of the world. So ASEAN is one of the target platforms for ASBE, and of course I mentioned APNED, which happens every year. And these are the global, maybe some of you are involved. CSW, I know Aside Foundation will be involved in CSW 63rd session, 11 to March 2019. And then the High-Level Political Forum, the theme is empowering people and ensuring inclusiveness and equality in 2019. So for us, it's very important because it will focus on SDG 4, which is on education, inclusive, quality, equitable, quality education, and lifelong learning. And it will also focus on Goal 8, which is on decent work, Goal 10 on reducing inequity within the country and among countries, and Goal 13, which is to take climate action. And then, of course, goal 16, promote peaceful and inclusive societies. So these are the 5 goals that will be reviewed in high-level political forum, plus the goal 17, which is annually being reviewed. So ASPE will be very active in that, and many of you members of ASPE I know will be active in this. And the UN Summit, September 2019, will also be very important because it will also talk about the SDGs. It will be, what's called this? Summit, not ministerial, no? High level, yeah, summit, and it will also look at the SDGs in September. So these are the platforms. These are some of the things that we're going to do in 2019. We hope ASPE can contribute towards what we have been discussing, the changing the breaking the barriers for women. And through education, ASPE would like to contribute through our small steps and advocacy. And hope you join us. I know many of you will join us in this advocacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thea and Elaine. Colleagues, we have about 10 minutes for questions and comments and reactions. Yes, Sita?
Yeah, I like the way Tia's starting about problem solution. I think this is how we construct it. I think from the learning from our experience, when we see the problem, I think we need to ask a lot of questions. And then the options for solution would emerge from that. Because otherwise, if we think about problem and solution and somebody telling us that solution, we would have another problem, add to problem. So with that, I would compliment the questions that Elaine was actually putting in the last slide. Because I have a lot of challenges in terms of skill and unskill, and we have the conversation also in market. When we talk about the skill development, you raise questions for what? And then who decide? Because this is actually the questions about where's the powers lie. Because if we look at in terms of the fourth industrial revolution, it's not how does it come to the fourth. We have to link back to the third and the second, which is the globalization and trade liberalization has been actually started in the second, and then the advance of World Wide Web in the third, and now we are in the arena that the robot is actually become reality. We actually only see that in the movie. So I think it's a huge question around the change nature of work. What's the change natures of work mean? What nature of work we are getting into? It's a complete change on how we relate and live in the society through cyber and internet, which is actually in the hand of the transnational corporation and military. That's technology, the digital technology is not in our hand, which is marginalized or the women or indigenous people. So again, I mean, when we talk about skill and education, where is the recognition of the education of indigenous people? Our own culture that rooted with land, waters, forests. Why it has to be in the digital? And then it's also questions about even entrepreneur. I think we also actually in Cambodia we experience the challenges that now even the PASA, which is the same thing about Grab and Uber, but in Cambodia we have PASA, which is the driver think that he owns his own business, but actually through app, 20% has been actually given to the company. But there's no advocacy platform because you don't know what you contract with, who you can actually advocate. So there's no actually unionized platform, because even you are still in the labor, but you are consider yourself as entrepreneur. I think that's quite scary. I don't know the answer, but it's a lot of question that we are trying that, are we really actually own our own business? Or we are just actually getting ourselves into the digital world, but the labor still there. So we are in a scary world that they can do farming without farmer. They can do manufacturing without the women workforce. And then get us to more flexibilization of contract. It's also scared about flexi, because when we say flexibilize in the north, it's different from flexibilization in the south. Because flexibilization contract with us, we get no benefit, no protection, no guarantee. You work based on the pieces, which is very low. So I think it's also kind of like a lot of questions that we have to question. And we as the women have all the forces and powers to make the change, but unless we come collectively, and unless we really understand what are the pressing buttons. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we are integrating ourselves into something that we really actually don't want it. But we just see that because it's the advertising, promotion, and all of that, fantasy, including artificial intelligence, smart city. So I would end here because this very much linked to the conversation we talk about education. Because education is not just in the system, it's not just the academic. It's very, very diverse. How do we respect that? And how we value that, and also make that become interdependent. It's not become a one form. Yeah. Similar with the accredited things, because I'm also teaching at the university on social work. I fight also, who are we? Should credit to a social work with degree, but not the people who actually practices for ages in the social work and services. Even I'm in that system, So it's kind of like, how do we link between the two, world? It's not easy, but it has it has to ask a lot of questions. Why and how and who have access and control. With this digital thing, it's not only about they control and develop it, but it's also they put the civilian around the people. We do anything, the civil society, being known by the government and being restricted in every spaces and platform through that, advancing technology.
Thank you so much. Others? Yes, please. More to add to the hotspots, I suppose.
Yeah, my name is Joy Josefina. So, yes, hi. So, I actually have more questions, and having helped with the study, so those questions are really real. But I guess just as a process for the study, because this is phase 1, going to phase 2. One is we are looking at different contexts, and therefore there's no question of even comparing achievements or gains. Yeah, but at the same time, where do we take everyone involved in the study, or us base partners at a particular footing, such that our conceptual understanding of skills of linking SDGs 1, 4, 8, and 10 are, that you can really stitch them together. Because many times, even the schools and women's empowerment is never linked to education, really. I mean, there's a lot of projects on women's empowerment that are not necessarily, linking SDG 4 or education and what it means, and definitely not in terms of marginalization of women. Yeah. So for the study, and which I guess is very good, because it's really looking at taking everything to the next level. We've been for decades talking about women's empowerment. We've had a lot of initiatives on legal reform, policy reform, but where do we actually make the big break so that we get to Agenda 2030? So pretty much it's about disruption. And that's actually the keyword that we've been hearing in the last couple of years. So what kind of disruptors should be there? So, and obviously here when we're talking about MTL, gone are the days when we say, okay, we have to do something, but we should not offend the men, we should not offend society, we should not offend the government. Basically, if we have to take spaces, we have to make that big step. If we're saying that, and I suppose Assad's example of getting women in the public space and taking taxi driving, which is traditionally men's job. So, and they're faced with that question, so aren't the men drivers upset? Aren't they harassing you? So I guess enough with those questions. We just have to take, expand the space for women, because that's the way we can change the narrative, really. We are saying that women are kept in the traditional space, so long as we keep ourselves there. But once there's a breakout, it has to happen. But so, in terms of India, of course, for the India study, we did just the Assad, which is actually focused on MTL. But of course, there's a lot of projects. There are more projects doing what we see in Indonesia and Afghanistan. But how do we actually bring everyone to that level that we can actually stop just saying that women have to take to the public space. So, and with much respect to the projects that women are doing everywhere else, but really, how do we kind of combine theory with practice now? So I guess that's the one. But other than that, there's for SDG 4, there's that whole section of what we call now need. Not in education, not in education, employment, or training. What do you do with that big chunk of people? As we see it, it's not only in India, it's across countries. That education level, literacy level is going up, but employment is going down.
Well, colleagues, very rich interventions and comments, actually, and some questions there. I'm sorry to keep to the time, maybe a minute of response from both of you. Elaine, would you like to start?
Oh my goodness. I was just, while you were talking, I remembered a report. I was remembering a report, I did a research report, and it must have been about 2003, where we did a mapping in Australia of all of the things that had gone on in the vet system there for women. And we ended up with a 25-page bibliography of things that have been written, done, projects, things like that for women, that wasn't ever published, and it's now totally disappeared. So we've had projects and projects and projects. At that time we called this report "Don't Be Too Polite, Girls," which is the first line of a union song, quite a famous women's trade union song. I think it's like they said, it's time to get noisy, but we need to be very strategic and look for the action points. And I think there are a number that we can actually together, particularly through the good work of ASPE, start to put our finger on. And the TVET systems at national level is one of them. If TVET were to become more inclusive and do what it's supposed to do, that would make things a lot easier. Another thing is to stop governments thinking if they give money to the women's department, that the women's department know anything about TVET or schools. And the money that they get is such a little bit of money. Yes, it does good where it lands, but we want more. We want our share, and it's time for that. nothing about us without us.
Maya, final words, final comments?
Oh, we always say that the SDG 5 is cross-cutting and gender equality is cross-cutting, and we in the education sector would like to say that education is at the foundation of gender equality. So please join us in our advocacy. So that's what I'm going to say. Thank you.
Well, colleagues, we're coming to a close of the session. It's a tricky thing, this advocacy. And especially for us who really want to keep our sights on structural change. Advocacy is about incremental change. Advocacy is about working within the limitations of reform. When we want more, when we seriously want far more, and we have to be constantly asking ourselves if the incremental change that we gain actually serves the ultimate goal or actually retards us. So it's a constant conversation we as activists need to always have, to know how to optimize and capture spaces, because a lot of what we have gained, a lot of what allows us to aspire for the structural change that we want is served by the gains we have achieved in the spaces. But we have to remind ourselves, always have our internal dialogue going, that that's not the end, and that we should make sure that we do not fall to co-option, that we do not get lured into governments expropriating our own words and concepts, but translating them into reductionist, into non-progressive, into terms which actually move us back. So, colleagues, it's a challenge for all of us. Data is one way by which we could challenge this. A dialogue constantly between practitioners, activists, and advocates to keep us grounded, to keep us reminding ourselves about the value base for all of us, and also building our conceptual framework, being on top of the debate, being on top of the discourse, and how our practice informs that, and how work on the ground informs that. And finally, if we are for advancing the rights of the marginalized, they should be with us. They should be front and center. How do we achieve leadership? How do we achieve mechanisms and structures so that agency of the marginalized women themselves are strengthened, and they inform and are on top of our own processes for decision making and advancing their rights and interests. So, colleagues, with that, thank you very much to all of you for your inputs. Thank you very much for our wonderful presentations and panelists, and thank you very much to Azad Foundation for this great opportunity of coming together.
Thank you so much, Maria, for having kindly moderated this session, and all of you panelists for such an engaging discussion. I would kindly request all of you to please join us for tea downstairs. And also please fill in the feedback form that you'll be sent by the end of the day. And also if somebody has headphones on them, they can just come return it to us. Thank you. Thank you. And a token of appreciation for all of you on behalf of us.
Mm-hmm.